Hi, I'm Dart, and this is my new free Reverb plugin, Plateau 2. You can get it in the description. Here's something that it can do. Here's an example of something I've been working on using it. So, first of all, it has two individual reverb instances called tanks. You can select between which one you're actively controlling using the tank selector at the top, although they will need to be enabled to work. First of all, we just have the dry, which controls how much of the original signal gets through. The dry is independent of the tank. Then we have the wet, which is just the output level of that specific tank. Moving on, we have the input filter, which adds filtering to the input of the reverb tank. So this will cut the highs and this will cut the lows, which I can show like this. Note that only applies to the reverb itself, not the dry signal. Then we have the size, which controls the apparent size of the space. And if you want a really small size, you can activate tuned mode, which just scales everything down. Then we also have the decay, which controls the length of the reverb tail. And then we have diffusion. Diffusion uses all-pass filters to kind of smear out the sound, and it works in a figure-8 pattern, so the sound goes into one chamber and then back to the other. And the diffusion kind of spreads out that transition and makes it one continuous sound rather than a bunch of echoes. If you turn off diffusion and make the size pretty big, you'll get just a bunch of echoes. But diffusion just smears that out to one sound like this. And the input diffusion just adds a bunch of smearing to the input before it even goes into the reverb. Moving on, we have freeze. This will make the reverb tail go on for as long as you want. And then we also have global freeze. And the difference is this freeze just freezes tank 1, for example, and this one is for tank 2 up here. And then this one just freezes both tanks at once. So if you have a reverb that uses both tanks, you can just freeze it really quickly. Then we have the clear. Exactly what you'd expect. And then global clear just does the same thing for both. Then we have the reverb filter. So this is actually a filter in this figure-8 pattern. So if you keep cutting more and more of the high, then that means that the high end will die out quicker. So that part of the tail will end faster. So here, if I turn down this, so that'll reduce the highs, then the reverb tail should only have low frequencies in it. And the opposite is true. So if I low cut, we should get only the high frequencies continuing on for a long time. So then we also have some simple modulation, and this kind of adds a vibrato effect. So this controls the amount. And this is the speed of it. We also have the shape, which follows this pattern here. So it can go saw down, then triangle, and then saw up. And if you set it to one of the saw modes, you actually get this like cool bubbling effect. Another interesting thing to note is that if you turn off the reverb, it won't actually clear it, it'll kind of just save its state. So you can kind of save the reverb tail and load it later like this. There is a bit of a pop, but you could probably come up with some way to get rid of that through a little envelope. Moving on, we have the routing page, and this allows you to send stuff around and control the stereo controls. So this is the input into the tank from your external sound source. So the reason you might want to turn off the input, for example, is if you're sending from the output of tank 1 into the input of tank 2, then this won't actually take in any external sound, it'll only take it in from the first tank. Then we also have the source. So this just controls which channel goes into the reverb. So if we put it on left, then only the left side will go into the actual reverb, and here only the right channel goes into the reverb. So you could use this, for example, by having one of the tanks have the left source and one of the tanks have the right, and then you could pan one left and pan right, and then you'd essentially get two separate reverbs, one only on the left channel, one only on the right channel, which is a neat effect. So then we have the width, which is what you'd expect. Pan. And then we have the sends. So you need to turn on both tanks for sending to work, because you actually got to have a tank to receive from and send to. And then you enable it here. And here I'm going to turn off the input. And then I'm going to mute the output of the first tank. Only the second tank output. Mute the dry. And then I should be able to send from the input into tank 1, then into tank 2, and then out. And we're getting some panning there. So here, since it's going through both tanks, it gets twice the reverb, which is super useful. Then we can also delay this. It's kind of hard to tell here, there. So now there's a delay from the input to the output of this, other way around. And then we can also do high cut and low cut. So finally, we also have the extras page, which adds a couple neat extra features like pre-delay. So if I just turn tank 2 off and isolate this, add some dry, so it kind of delays the reverb. Then we have soft clip, which just adds distortion for if it gets too loud. I'll have a demo of that in a sec. We also have the variance. So I said it kind of works in this figure 8 pattern, and the variance is the difference between the delays in the left half and the delays in the right half. So the tank variance here, if I turn this off, now the two chambers will be identical and there'll be no stereo width. The modulation also adds stereo width. So if I just turn off the modulation like that, it's completely mono here because there's no difference between the left and right. If I add some modulation though, we will still get some variance in stereo width. So if I turn off the mod variance, then it will go mono again. So you can create this kind of hybrid mono stereo effect by having just a tiny amount of variance in the modulation and no tank. So the tank's completely mono, but the modulation adds a bit of width. And it kind of feels both mono and stereo at the same time. Like, you can feel how centered it feels, but also wide. I think it's really neat. Anyway, we also have nested diffusion. And what this does is increase the diffusion in the tank. So it makes it more powerful using another all-pass filter type. It's kind of hard to tell. I can try to show it off. Maybe it's not hard to tell. There you go. So it can make the decay go on for longer and smears it more. Then once and only if nested diffusion is on, you can also activate the diffusion decay, and this will control the decay parameter of the nested diffusion. So then we have a help here, which will just give you the manual and all the instructions that I'm providing here. And then there's also finally dangerous settings. Now, they can be pretty cool, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend using them too much because they're also very dangerous and can blast your ears, which I've had the fun of experiencing several times. So you'll want to add a limiter or just really low volume before you even touch it. And I really wouldn't recommend saving a preset with dangerous settings turned on, because I've had times where when you load the preset, it just goes so loud. Okay. Oh, can we have something a bit... There we go. So if you turn the decay up above 1, you'll get basically just feedback, and this happens. Okay, that sounds really cool. And the soft clipper will, as you'd expect, make that less harsh. So you can also turn it down and the same thing will happen. Also note that I made a recent patch. The dangerous settings, when you turn it off, it now clears the tanks. So older versions don't do that. So if you want that feature, you just have to re-download it from Gumroad, and that should give you that feature. And then finally, for routing, if you want to route the two tanks into each other, you can create really bad feedback loops, but that's why it requires dangerous settings. But you can do so. And I found that it can be a very useful effect, so I'll give that a try. I'll make sure tank 2's on. Don't forget that. And then... you can get even more reverb, because they go into each other. So I'd like to just wrap things up by playing what I made with it. So, I hope you enjoyed and found that useful, and I hope you'll try out my new plugin. Have fun!